France 24 debate. We're discussing the guilty verdict handed down to Jacques Chirac, the first former French head of state to be convicted since World War II. With us to talk about it, France 24 politics editor Mark Perlman, attorney Ron Sofer, Stefan Siemens, Paris correspondent for Der Spiegel, and from Aston University in Birmingham, James Shields is on the telephone. Thank you, all of you, for being with us. We were discussing the popularity of Jacques Chirac before the break. Mark Perlman was telling us how in the opinion polls, despite all the baggage that's out there and all these corruption charges, which are no longer charges, which are more than just mere charges now after this verdict, he's still very popular. And he's been popular throughout the years for several reasons. We can first of all take a look at a youthful Jacques Chirac. This is back in 1968, and he's the government negotiator who ends a general strike born of the student uprising that had brought France to his knees. And that's what really put him, James Shields, on the political map at the time.
Sorry, I misheard. Can you just repeat the question, please?
I'm saying that Jacques Chirac came on the political map as this young, dynamic man who helped negotiate the deal, what they call the Grenelle Accords, that ended the student uprising and the general strike in 1968.
Yes, I mean, Chirac, as a young, dynamic politician, was formidable. And we all remember Georges Pompidou's nickname for him, which was the bulldozer. If there was work to be done, Chirac was the man to be put in the front line to do it. Can I come back, though, just very briefly on the point on which we closed before the break, which is about the reputation of Chirac, if you like. I mean, we need to remember that this is a president who was known as super menteur. Now, this
super liar
was given to him by the Guignol puppet show. But clearly, it stuck. And there was a saying that gained currency towards the end of his presidency, which was liberté, égalité, impunité. So there was... I mean, I'm speaking from a cross-channel perspective here. And we have long on this side of the channel thought that the French are rather indulgent towards the peccadillos of their political masters. And I think Chirac's case, in a way, holds that up, which is not to say that as a young politician and as a coming man in the 60s and 70s, he was not, as I said, a formidable force. He certainly was, and he was a thorn in the side of Giscard d'Estaing, for sure. I mean, we're talking about his election as mayor of Paris. Another reason for that, for standing as mayor of Paris, was precisely to give him the power base to challenge Giscard in 1981.
1981 for the presidency. Now we're going to look at why he remained popular, despite what you call there these picadillos. Jacques Chirac was agriculture minister for less than 2 years, and it was back in the early 70s, but farmers would love him forever. Chirac negotiating the generous subsidy system of Europe's common agricultural policy. Stefan Siemens, you were telling us before we went on air how you followed one time Jacques Chirac.
Yeah, I followed him in the province close to the Pyrenees Mountains, and even now he was already an ex-president at this point, and still I was flabbergasted by the immediately contact he had, you know. And I think that's one of the strengths. It's part of the French political system as well, that you have to have anchorage in a region. His is the Corrèze, where actually the new...
the center of France.
The center of France, where actually the new contestant for Sarkozy, François Hollande, is coming from. So here you have a politician who, even while he's being away in the Élysée, still knows how to kind of have contact, direct touchdown with the local populace. And that works extremely well with the French who are accustomed to the person in the Élysée being kind of a faraway monarch, if Republican at that.
It's interesting is that when we look at some of your reactions, we see generally they're positive towards Jacques Chirac. One person wrote into us on Twitter that what he remembers of Chirac is his foundation, that it helps promote dialogue between cultures, respect of the environment. Alexander on Facebook from Paris says, saying no to the war in Iraq is what he remembers, and the fact that he was a bon vivant, as they call him here. He would eat 2 baguette sandwiches with pâté between meals and a 5-egg omelet after a big dinner, Mark Perlman.
Yes, I mean, this is, in France, it's a big deal. I mean, it might sound trivial, but it's not. And this is Franz-Olivier Gisbert, who's a famous political commentator, once actually described what Chirac was eating in a day, and it's just amazing. He was having toast with marmalade and honey at 7 in the morning, 10:30 a sandwich with salami and meat pâté, a huge lunch with generally calf's head, then at 4:30 again a sandwich with salami, and again a huge meal, and if he was coming late, yes, the late night 4-egg omelette, and 5 or 6 beers a day. So it's just, he appears kind of, outside personality who loved life, who loved, going out, and this is, but this played a part in the sympathy people have now for Chirac. He was very unpopular toward the end of his presidency. We shouldn't forget that.
And we should all mention that all his food, what he ate, was of course never paid for it. Ever since he entered
by the taxpayer.
the town hall, he never paid for his food, never paid for his cars, nor for his room and board, nor even for his hairdresser. Actually,
and even today, Mark.
And yeah, today he's living in an apartment given to him by Lebanese friends for free.
By
Can I
the
come in there?
Hariri family, to be
Yeah, so this is a guy.
James Shields.
Sorry to interrupt, but it really just underlines those last points. Really, just underline the contrast between Chirac and his supposed spiritual in spirit of de Gaulle, father of the Fifth Republic and father of Chirac's political family, and the austere morality and scrupulous honesty that de Gaulle always exhibited. We're talking about sort of consumption here, but of course, when de Gaulle had members of his family at the Élysée for dinner, he paid out of his own pocket. So the contrast could not be more stark.
And yet he got away with it. Ron Sofer, this sort of general feeling that they're all corrupt. You has to deal with the borders between politics and the judiciary as an attorney. Is this something that's hurt the political class in this country?
Well, first of all, it seems that it's not so easy to get away with it. I mean, if you look at what happened to him today, what happened to Juppé, what happened to many politicians in France, it is. I think that I would be very surprised if he doesn't appeal this conviction, because in France, once you appeal the conviction, you're still presumed innocent. So you were talking about the charges not being charges. If he appeals this decision, the charge
we go back to saying the word alleged again.
It reverts back to being charges, and his presumption of innocence is still there. And it can go all the way up to the Supreme Court, and even if he is convicted in the Supreme Court, which will be a final decision as far as the French system is concerned, it could still go up to the European Court of Human Rights. And I think that as far as human rights are concerned, there are many issues that are raised by this case, by the passage of time, by the fact that someone who has memory troubles, and was convicted. And the fact that you had people basically prosecuting him who had no business being there in the end. So there are many irregularities. So this will not end today. I think it will take.
So there's
it will take
definitely
many years.
with this verdict
Yes.
that came out. Now I want to get back to a point that you made. Most of Chirac's second term overshadowed by his bitter rivalry with the man who would become his successor. We can listen to what President Chirac had to say about his then finance minister, Nicolas Sarkozy, who'd already gained control of the ruling UMP party. This was on Bastille Day back in 2004.
There are no differences between myself and the finance minister. I make the decisions and he carries them out.
It seems as though, of course, Mark Perlman, Nicolas Sarkozy got the last laugh, as it were.
Well, clearly, at the time, it was a very peculiar situation because Jacques Chirac was the president, and Nicolas Sarkozy was a minister of a government, a Gaullist government. So they were in the same camp, but there was already this war because there were maybe some questions whether Chirac might run again. And Sarkozy, who had his eyes on the presidency for a long while and was a very popular minister at the time, not as finance minister, a position he kept for a very short while, but as interior minister in charge of the police, security and so on. And Nicolas Sarkozy, it was a very, very tough times. There were lots of tensions, especially when you know the history. Chirac, when we saw these images of him young, is very similar to what Sarkozy was at the beginning of his career. And Chirac is the one who recognized Sarkozy as a rising star when he was in his early 20s, in the mid-70s. So they were very close at some point. There was a break between them in the 1990s when Sarkozy backed Édouard Balladur as a rival of Jacques Chirac. But clearly this interview was really surreal because we were talking about people who were not in the opposite each other, but supposed to be in the same camp.
And in the same government as well.
Well, clearly, this was a clash of generations there. I mean, Sarkozy had started out as the political stepson of Chirac. I mean, he was at the home of the Chiracs. He was very close to Bernadette Chirac, very close, it seems, for a time, to Claude Chirac, the only daughter. And then all of a sudden, he kind of turned his back around in the Balladur case. And from ever there, this moment on, there was kind of a rupture, a break.
1995.
Between the two. And I think the moment that Sarkozy kind of tried to bypass this Chirac and says, I'm going to be the next president of the Fifth Republic, I think that's when things got really down the drain.
Now, Chirac's out of the picture politically today, but just a few weeks ago, his former PM, the man you may remember as the foreign minister who said no to French intervention in Iraq, he threw his hat in the ring. Dominique de Villepin, who's got a huge rivalry with Sarkozy, one that's so bitter that the latter became the first sitting president in living memory to sue another politician. This over an alleged smear campaign. And now Villepin is running for president.
Even if for 6 years, everything was done to distance me from politics by systematically making false accusations, I'd like to defend a certain idea of France during these elections, and I'm convinced that the 2012 election will be the time to be truthful, courageous, and willing.
This hatred, we can call it a hatred, between Dominique de Villepin and Nicolas Sarkozy. James Shields, it's the spillover of the rivalry between Chirac and Sarkozy?
I think there is an element of that, and in a sense, de Villepin can still be seen as Chirac's man. I think also that de Villepin's candidacy is potentially very dangerous for Sarkozy. If de Villepin rises in the polls, and if one or two more centre-right or centrist politicians throw their hats in the ring, and there are already a few of them, then Sarkozy does risk seeing his support base being drained off in the centre, and also, of course, seriously threatened on the right by Marine Le Pen. So I think de Villepin knows that he could possibly put a spoke in Sarkozy's wheel here.
So, Mark Proman, is Nicolas Sarkozy's biggest problem from his own side of the aisle rather than from the opposition?
Well, he has to make sure he gets as many votes as he can in the first round, and as a result, the more competitors they are, the more difficult it is for him. Dominique de Villepin, for now, is polling around 1%, not a major danger. We have to wait because those polls predate his announcement, which was a surprise announcement, because despite all the hatred, there were meetings between Sarkozy and Villepin in recent months, and everyone thought they had cut a deal whereby Villepin would not run in order to facilitate Nicolas Sarkozy's re-election bid. So there are still some tensions, obviously, also maybe because Villepin's name has appeared in yet other judicial cases. So we come back to this kind of Chirac problem where politicians have their names come up in judicial cases, and that's still the case today.
All right, so what goes around comes around. For some, though, of you, this verdict is an example to be heralded. On Facebook, Aliou from Dakar in Senegal writes, many African leaders should be judged in the same way as Chirac. But we look at the case, and again, we get back, Ron Sofer, to the verdict. 2 years suspended sentence. Over the U.S. last week, the former governor of Illinois, Ron Blagojevich, sentenced to 14 years. That's not suspended sentence. That's hard time. This for corruption charges that included trying to sell Barack Obama's old Senate seat. So it does seem from the outside that 2 years suspended sentence is a slap on the wrist.
Well, I think 14 years in prison is a very, very harsh and I consider uncivilized sentence for a non-violent crime. I think that the French system has shown itself to have worked in a very positive way, because the point was made. I think that politicians have gotten the point. I think politicians will be much more careful as a result of this, and the jurisprudence, the French jurisprudence, which says basically that in non-violent first-time offenders, a suspended sentence is usually enough in order to deter them from doing this again. And I think it's a much more balanced system than sending someone for 14 years in prison.
And we mustn't forget, we're in pre-election mode here in France. So I think even for Sarkozy, who kind of complained today in nice words, the legacy of Chirac, even given this, I think it goes to the benefit of the ruling politicians, because they can now say, okay, the case is closed. It has shown the impartiality of the French system, and it gives a boost against this feeling of that up there they all alike, and France, is not yet arrived at a modern democracy. So in that respect, it even will work to the benefit of the ruling Conservative Party.
Do you agree that it's a watershed moment in that respect?
I mean, clearly it is a watershed moment because of the symbol, because, again, of what was said in the judgment, clearly pointing the finger at Chirac directly, not to an underling or something, because all the other sentences are much lighter than Chirac. So clearly they wanted to make the difference and say the buck stops with Jacques Chirac, as a way to say, French politicians, even high-placed one, cannot just say, "Oh, I didn't know," and it might still be an issue for ruling politicians. We know the current president's name has
come
appeared
up in other affairs
in an investigation into potential kickbacks. Obviously, he has immunity, but that will be during the election campaign, probably a debate, because the socialists have said they want to change this rule whereby
the immunity rule.
The immunity rule.
We'll be discussing that ticking time bomb another time. I want to thank you, though, Mark Perlman. I want to thank Stefan Siemens and Ron Sofer. And I also want to thank James Shields for joining us from Aston University, and you for being with us here in the France 24 debate. Stay with us. Coming up next, it's time for business, and that is hosted by Marcus Carlson.